Hello on the air, the program time. In our broadcast, in the Ulan-Ude airport, terrorists have seized a helicopter with hostages and they have just been released. 50 billion rubles was the value assessed in Moscow of the damage from the earthquake in Sakhalin. In the last 24 hours, the rescuers have been exhuming only bodies to the surface. In Chechnya, the regrouping of federal forces is underway before the last offensive. In the Republic, a cholera agent has been discovered. Bosnian Serbs have released the second group of hostages from the UN peacekeeping force. Boris Yeltsin congratulates the Patriarch Alexei II on the 5th year of his being selected and presents state awards in the area of art. To come to Russia is marvelous. That's a quote from Elton John about Moscow and Muscovites. We begin with an urgent report from Buryatia. 3 unidentified masked individuals in Ulan-Ude airport seized a civil aviation helicopter. The terrorists demanded free flight passage in the direction which they would indicate, plus 3 billion rubles. As Intertas just reported, the hostages, 3 pilots and 2 technicians, have been released. What has become of the terrorists is not known. During these moments, our correspondents should make contact, and we're very hopeful by the end of this broadcast to give you details and the report from the site of the occurrence. On the site of the town of the Sakhalin oil workers in Neftegorsk, destroyed by the earthquake, rescue work continues. Unfortunately, in the last several days, none of those dug out from the rubble was alive. Victor Karetkikh reported from the tragedy site. All the operating equipment in Neftegorsk has been brought to the remaining 4 sites not cleared of rubble. More than 20,000 tons of steel and concrete debris should be sifted through. Since the beginning of rescue work, the people, with the aid of technology, have sifted through 70,000 tons of various types of debris. The number of survivors from those exhumed from the rubble has not increased, but a unique sensation was the announcement by the District Immigration Service that as of today, 51 more live and unharmed residents of Neftegorsk registered, apart from those 348 who were accounted for after the catastrophe. These 51 people, by fortunate chance for various reasons, were outside of Neftegorsk at the time of the tragedy. Together with them, the number of survivors is 805 of the 2,997 residents of the village. From under the rubble, 2,036 have been exhumed. Under the mounds of rubble, still 500 remain. Of top priority after clearing rubble is the recultivation of the lands within the site of the catastrophe. That's 1.5 square kilometers. Currently, for these purposes, to Neftegorsk, additional land excavating equipment is being brought in. According to data verified by our correspondents, by evening today, in the list of survivors are 1,100 Neftegorians. Under the rubble, 400 remain approximately. Damage from the earthquake in Sakhalin is assessed at 500 billion rubles. This was stated by the first Vice Premier Saskovets to Intertas. According to him, the government of Russia has already allotted necessary funds to resettle the victims. Saskovets added that a resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers will be signed to issue special housing certificates to victims from the disaster calculated on a basis of 18 square meters of housing for each family member. Today at the session of the Interdepartment Commission on Sakhalin in the Ministry of Emergency Situations of Russia, the question was raised sharply about evacuating people from Neftegorsk. According to the Vice Governor of Sakhalin, almost all of them remain still where their town once stood. This generated the extreme dissatisfaction of the chairman of the commission, Edek Saskovets. Why are you demonstrating your helplessness? We have provided you with aviation for your disposal. No one asks you a kopeck for the transportation of people. To evacuate, feed the people, and settle them in normal circumstances. Is that not your responsibility? The Sakhalinian vice governor justified himself, saying that the victims can't leave because they didn't receive their subsidies. Regarding financial means, we don't quite understand who you take us for. We can give you the account numbers for the funds which were transferred. Only through the ministry, aid was provided gratuitously at this hour. The money is in your accounts, and I can tell you to the kopeck, 36,027,400,000 rubles. And that's not counting what was transferred to you through the federal government. According to Sergei Shoigu, under the rubble currently 167 people remain. Hope that at least some of them will survive is very dim, yet the rescue work continues. As we see, emotions were boiling at that session. Meanwhile, people continue to die. From serious injuries in the hospitals of Vladivostok, 7 people died of the 43 brought there after the Sakhalin earthquake. This was stated today by the Primorye Hungarian RIM headquarters of emergency situations. For certain patients, extremities had to be amputated. Among them, there are 9 children. The federal forces in Chechnya are regrouping their forces in the Nozhayurt and Shatoy directions with the aim of continuing an advance in the near future in the mountainous regions of the Republic, Interfax was told by military sources. Dudayev gunmen are retreating, entering crossfire with block posts of federal forces. On this map, denoted in pink arrows, is the assault of the federal forces, and the dotted line marks the retreat of the Dudayev forces. According to the Russian military, in the last 2 days, there were no losses among the personnel of the federal forces. In the village of Vidino, organs of local rule and militia, comprised of residents of Chechnya, have begun to work. According to the Russian military command, in various regions of the Republic, dialogues are underway with the field commanders of the Dudayev fighters on surrendering weapons. Maybe not as quickly as many would have liked, but the situation in Chechnya, distribution of forces, changes daily and hourly. To a great degree, this is connected with the fact that the armed groups squeezed out of the regional center of Vidino. Incidentally, this operation took no longer than 30 minutes. Here, we seized an enormous volume of technology, 9 tanks, 7 combat vehicles, and several combat transporters. The gunmen, the scattered remains of the gang formations, are attempting to escape outside the parameters of the blockaded region, outside of the parameters of Vidino, further into mountains. We just met with residents. People are of a good frame of mind and understand what a tragedy the Dudayev regime caused to the Chechen people. Look with what a force you came today. Couldn't this force remove Dudayev on time? With the taking of Vidino, the armed group was divided into 2. Units of federal forces advancing in the easterly direction are now on the border with Dagestan and hence locked the circle around one of such units. According to Anatoly Kulikov, currently on the Dudayev side, there is no more than 3,000 gunmen. However, lately, the command of the federal forces often is approached by entire groups of Chechen insurrectionists who, in exchange for guarantees of impunity, are prepared to cease their combat and lay down their weapons. In just a few days, it will be exactly half a year since the beginning of the armed operation in Chechnya. Andrei Sergeyevich, how do you presume, when will the military operation be completed? It will be completed just as soon as our objectives are achieved. I think that that time is not far off. Information which at this hour only our information agency has. In Grozny, in one of the most used water reservoirs for drinking and bathing, near the spring near the brick factory, a cholera agent was discovered. Today, epidemiologists from Moscow, Rostov, and Stavropol flew to Chechnya. Medics had feared this hour, hoped that it would not come, and prepared for the threat of the repeat of last year's outbreak when 800 people were afflicted became a reality. The rector Vibrio was isolated by specialists of the sanitary regiment working in Grozny since the end of February. The situation is aggravated by the fact that in the city only 2 water reservoirs of 4 are functioning. Sewage is virtually not functioning. Impurified waste is dumped into the Sunja River. What is this? Whether a cholera vibrio which hibernated the winter or affected or carriers in Grozny, we have to find out now. What are your predictions? To a great degree, much will depend on what measures are undertaken by the government and those services of the federal organs which are located there. Today, Grozny needs water in large volumes, and it also needs functioning sewage and food. This was an interview which Gennady Anishenko gave our program today before his departure for Chechnya. In his opinion, medics have managed to isolate the vibrio of cholera in the very early stages, which inspires hope. The President of Russia plans to leave tomorrow for Sochi, where on the 9th of June, as is known, the Russian-Ukrainian summit will occur. As the press secretary today of the head of state, Sergei Medvedev, stated, upon arrival in Sochi, Yeltsin will hold a business meeting with the participation of the Prime Minister Chernomyrdin and experts, where they will agree on positions for talks dedicated basically to the fate of the Black Sea Fleet. Regarding the perspectives of the Sochi summit, Sergei Medvedev expressed the opinion that quite possibly it will not resolve the practical questions of the fate of the Black Sea Fleet. Incidentally, apart relations with Russia, there's one more, an internal Ukrainian problem, and quite a serious one, were relations between Parliament and President. They were because today it seems a breakthrough has come. Constitutional agreement between the Parliament and President was that fragile straw which was grasped by the two branches of government in Ukraine and managed without losing dignity to resolve the crisis. The morning appearance of Leonid Kuchma in Parliament and his address were viewed by national deputies as a step toward seeking compromise. In essence, the constitutional agreement, adopted by a simple majority, is the basic law of the country until the adoption of a new constitution. And until that moment, for approximately 1 year, it forbids the President and Parliament to hold any type of referendum or social poll on any topic except for the question of the Constitution itself. You know how it is when cosmonauts are prepared for a joint flight. They are placed in a vacuum chamber in order to study psychological compatibility. And I think that that compatibility has not yet been achieved, but already now the President and the Supreme Soviet are in that chamber. Time is needed for them to adjust to each other and understand. The agreement remains open for signing by those deputies who were not present at the session or for those who will wish to change their position. Tomorrow, in a solemn atmosphere, it will be signed by Leonid Kuchma and Alexander Maros, and although the agreement is a judicial condition on the backdrop of a political agreement, according to the Speaker, for the President it means support for his reform course by the legislators, although for now on paper. Today in Moldova, another round of talks was held between leadership of that republic and the leaders of Pridnestrovia. Participants of the session, the chairman of the permanent mission of the OSCE in Moldova, Michael Eugen, appealed that points of congruity be found in order to establish peace and accord in the region. Each meeting brings us closer to resolving the main problem, that is, so that there would never be war here. Delegation members, with participation of Russian delegates, discussed the draft law on a special legal status of Pridnestrovia. In the dialogue process, to define the role, place and status of Pridnestrovia in the process of our dialogue, very interesting and new aspects emerged. The discussion was detailed article by article, but not on all points was unanimity of views achieved. The groups of the Moldavian and Pridnestrovian experts were assigned to continued work of search for compromise and to prepare a new proposal for the next meeting, which is scheduled for Tiraspol, the 5th of July. Today in Sukhumi, at the joint session of Parliament and Government of Abkhazia, the majority of deputies expressed themselves against the federal union with Georgia. Speaking during the discussions, the Abkhazian leader Ardzinba didn't exclude the possibility of holding a referendum in that republic, which is to raise the question, are you for a state union with Georgia, or are you for with state union with Russia? Today in Stepanakert, representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross conveyed 15 Azerbaijani prisoners of war held in Nagorno-Karabakh, the agency Interfax reported. The Church plays an increasingly significant role and visible role in our lives. Much depends on the personality of the head of the Church. Today, the 5th anniversary of the ascent to the Patriarchate of the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Alexei II. At the festive function in the Kremlin, the only film crew present was from the program time. The cross of service of the top hierarch was laid on the Patriarch Alexei, if not in the most traditional but the most difficult times for the Russian Orthodox Church. Today, marking already the 5th anniversary of that event, in the Dormition Cathedral of the Moscow Kremlin, a prayer service was held, which was conducted by the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, in consultation with members of the Holy Synod. In an exclusive interview for the program time, Patriarch Alexei said, "If I've managed to do something for the spiritual and moral rebirth of Russia and Russians, the rebirth of the demolished churches and monasteries, in recreating that social service to one's neighbor, which was always inherent to the Russian Orthodox Church, I thank God for what I was able to do." Much strength and firmness of character, and the main thing is an unwavering faith, is demanded from the Patriarch by the process of the rebirth of the Church. Political events, changes in the life of the country, he several times stated, for me, are important in their human measurement. Do they help people live according to the gospel, or do they complicate the path in finding Christ? Salvation of Russia, Patriarch Alexei says, is in the rebirth and of the spirituality and morality, and this position commands respect. The first president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, came to congratulate the Patriarch. Much has been done in Russia through the labors of His Holiness. Just have a look around and travel throughout Holy Rus, or Russia. How many cathedrals have been restored, and how many churches have been restored, and how many more believers there are. Believers in God, believers in hope, believers in Russia and its rebirth and its greatness. And the fact that it will be great, none of us has any doubts. The President expressed hope that in the future, hand in hand with the civil government, the Church will lead Russia toward greatness and power. And now, of problems strictly of a secular nature, President Yeltsin placed a veto on the law adopted by the Federal Assembly regarding the state defense order for the year, since the State Legal Department of the administration of the head of state has pointed out many inconsistencies of the document with the Constitution and several laws, we were told in the press center of the Ministry of Defense. Today's planned review in the Duma of the state of affairs in the defense sector by proposal of the government has been postponed until the 21st of June. Hence, the first Vice Premier Saskovets was not present in the Duma. Speaking to the deputies, the Minister of Defense, the defense industry, Gluhich, named one of the reasons for that the Cabinet of Ministers was extremely preoccupied with liquidating repercussions of the Sakhalin earthquake. On what occurred in the Duma today, our correspondents report. The topic of the coming parliamentary elections again attracted deputy attention, especially since yesterday Boris Yeltsin met with Ivan Rybkin, where they discussed the law on the elections of deputies. As the speaker told his colleagues, the president feels that Duma elections should be held precisely on schedules established by law, and it's possible that the document will preserve the norm of representation, 225 to 225 deputies elected from lists and from districts, but with amendments to the law to be made, specifically that parliamentarians running on a general federal list cannot run in one-mandate districts. The presidential proposals, in the opinion of some deputies, radically changed the document, and the Duma couldn't immediately deal with all the fine points of the changes. Tomorrow, a three-sided conciliatory commission will meet, where representatives of parliament and the president will again attempt to find a compromise. The plenary session began with talk of the Sakhalin earthquake. The deputies decided that it's necessary to develop a law to support the Sakhalin district, but while the document is in the works, the Duma created a parliamentary commission to investigate reasons which led to the tragedy in Neftegorsk. Today, by decree of Boris Yeltsin, in the system of organs of federal executive power, a new committee has been formed, the State Committee of the Russian Federation, to support the development of small business. It is to be headed by the 45-year-old Vyacheslav Prokhorov. The third Congress of the Union of Oil Industrialists of Russia was held in Moscow today and became a unifying Congress. The oil workers are now in one union with another prime sector of the fuel energy sector, the gas sector. The delegates, in a moment of silence, honored the memory of the victims of Neftegorsk. The first to aid the buried victims were specialized services of the Sakhalin Oil Gas Company, which provided the necessary equipment. The sorrow brought oil sector workers closer today, attempting to change the state of affairs in their sector. It is experiencing a severe financial crisis, although the goods of that sector are profitable and in demand. Until recently, the growth of prices on oil was restrained by directive. As a result, goods used by the oil sector are purchased at world prices, while the price of oil is not more than 70, for gasoline 60% of world prices. Oil gas industry workers are convinced that the government must pursue a policy of rational protectionism, especially in export. In the opinion of the President of the Union, Vladimir Medvedev, the government shouldn't rush to issue stock of oil companies onto the security markets, which will destroy it, turn the issue into a cheap sale, and deprive the government of control over the oil gas sector. In a word, oil gas workers urge politicians to follow the formula, don't harm. And as a social organization, we'll participate in political battle. We intend to support the right-centrist movement, Our Home is Russia, and enter it as a part of its collective membership. The news from the Moscow exchange: the rate of the Russian ruble in trading today fell by 6 points and was recorded at the level of 4,096 rubles for $1 American dollar. The third national exhibit, Israel 1995, which was opened in Moscow today by the first Vice Premier of the government of Russia, Oleg Saskovets, gathered almost 100 of the most reputable firms of that country. Israeli entrepreneurs and businessmen demonstrated all the very best which is produced and processed in the province promised land. Presented were such traditional sectors of industry which could interest domestic Russian specialists and inspire them to create joint manufacturing projects. And this already indicates that we are sought not only for trade but for working together. One must say that Israel today is among the 12 most developed countries of the world. One of the deciding factors in the stabilizing of the relations between Russia and Israel was the agreement on cooperation and trade achieved in 1994. The exhibit which opened is the best proof of the broad opportunities of such mutually beneficial trade economic ties. The most important international news: Bosnian Serbs have freed 108 more military servicemen of the UN who were seized after the NATO aviation blows. 2 buses with the released blue helmets crossed the border of Bosnia and Yugoslavia near the town of Zvornik. It's expected they'll be taken to Zagreb, where the headquarters of the UN in former Yugoslavia is located. The representative of the Serbian Authority expressed hope that the rest of the 148 UN peacekeepers in the hands of the Bosnian Serbs will be released in the very near future. This morning in that group, all 58 Ukrainian military servicemen of the UN contingent were released, who were seized as hostages by the Bosnian Serbs. This was reported by the press service of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The released officers, ensigns and soldiers are resting and in the town of Novi Sad in the Federative Republic of Yugoslavia. In the near future will be sent to Sarajevo, where they will continue to serve within the UN Blue Helmet contingent. The personal message of Boris Yeltsin was conveyed in London to the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Major, by the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev. The 2-day visit of Andrei Kozyrev to a significant degree helped to synchronize the positions of London and Moscow on Bosnia, NATO, and the coming Halifax Conference of the developed 7 countries of the West, plus Russia. Dialogues with the Prime Minister, John Major, yielded at least 3 items of good news. Britain has agreed that all NATO operations in Bosnia should be in compliance with the UN mandate. The British Premier should support Russia's striving to become the 8th full-fledged, not only political, but economic voice at the Halifax Conference. Finally, John Major agreed that in New Europe there should be no new dividing lines, nor old ones. The conversation with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Douglas Hurd, was more concentrated on 2-sided relations. It barely touched on Chechnya. Moreover, it touched on problems of Russia's coexistence with NATO. A magic solution can't be proposed by anyone currently, but a step forward has been made. The level of mutual consultations will grow, which will help to exclude potential surprises from both sides. Before the minister's flight to Sochi, naturally, again he had to return to domestic affairs. I think that we must expect serious talks on the highest level, the level of presidents. And I think one must see in this that the Russian side does not permit the thought of any breaches, gaps, or major collisions with our Ukrainian neighbors. And therefore we continue the political dialogue, and we will strive to resolve these questions which face us. Having said this, Andrei Kozyrev left today from London to Sochi. There he will participate in the coming meeting of the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. Today is a unique day of dialogues, and in places, as we've become convinced, sides did achieve success. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of North Korea stated today that at the Kuala Lumpur talks between America and North Korea on the problem of supplying Pyongyang with light water nuclear reactors, the sides finally have achieved principal agreement on the main issues. As is reported, the dialogues entered the final phase, and today these sides began the business consultations on joint publication of the document. It's already known that North Korea and the United States have agreed on such issues as the choice of the type of light water reactor, the means of sealing the transaction, and the question of payment of expenses for construction. That is the most heated problems which impeded agreement at the talks which began the 19th of May. The basic contradiction was which reactors in Yonbin would the Soviet-type reactors be be replaced with, at which, as is presumed, could produce weapons-grade plutonium usable in producing nuclear bombs. North Korea insisted on Russian reactors in the United States on South Korean ones. This, however, evoked the rage of Communist Korea, who stated that the South Korean reactor doesn't even exist on Earth and it's simply a phantom, that is, an inferior version of the American. The second primary question was the payment for the project, because Korea categorically stated that it won't pay anything until all conditions are created to launch the reactor after the completion of its construction. For now, it's not yet known what compromises were reached by the sides, but according to certain sources, North Korea has asked $1 billion in addition to the assessed $4.5 billion value of the program of aid to Korea in reprofiling its nuclear program. Regarding the nationality of the reactor, nothing is known about that either. Ignoring the protests from China, the president of Taiwan, Lee Teng-hui, left today on his visit to the United States, which is assessed as a major diplomatic victory of his administration over Beijing. Although this trip is officially considered to be a private one in the Chaikashi airport in Taipei, a pompous bon voyage was staged with the top leadership of the island. Beijing, in harsh tones, condemned the U.S. decision to grant a visit to the president of Taiwan and threatened that the current visit will have serious repercussions on American-Chinese relations. In China itself, as a result of flooding which was caused by torrential rains in the provinces of Sichuan and Jiangsu, 72 people have died and hundreds have been injured. The levels of rivers and reservoirs for days is at 2 meters higher than the critical levels. The flood has affected more than 2 million people. And now an occurrence in our country. In Sochi, a terrible auto accident occurred, as a result of which 1 person died and 12 were hospitalized. This bus was recently purchased in Germany and carrying 12 passengers was en route from the Adler airport to downtown Sochi. The accident occurred at approximately 7:45 a.m. on half route. The bus, for unknown reasons yet, was carried out onto the oncoming lane of traffic over the median, and later, crashing through the guardrail, it fell over an escarpment, rolling down 20-25 meters, landed on a railway track. Receiving a signal of what had occurred, rescue services of the city in just moments organized the necessary effort to aid the victims. Unfortunately, 1 woman died on site. The rest of the passengers and the driver of the bus, receiving injuries of varying degrees, were hospitalized. The circumstances and the reasons for the vehicular accident are being investigated by the transportation prosecutor of Sochi. According to the awards calendar, the old year just ended because Boris Yeltsin today presented state awards in the areas of literature and art for 1994. For the first time, the strict award was deemed worthy of all the muses, including the stage ones as well. Everyone should have been named, but time is a factor, so recognize them yourselves. Many of the faces are familiar and loved by the people. The composer, Georgy Sviridov, is a music legend and a living classic. His songs from concert halls are already heard in cathedrals. The writer-critic, Lydia Chukovskaya, she was ill and her daughter accepted the award on her behalf, was awarded for her book on Akhmatova. Her entire life deserves an award. She managed, in the years of stagnation, to remain a measure of truth and literary dignity in literary circles. Together with the builders of the Moscow architects and the Turkish construction company Mir, also earned a state award. This building is a bright example of a functional and harmonized construction, which is at the end of Lenin Prospect in the capital. There are special coincidences, a sound, a word, or a gesture to which one reacts as if your very soul has been caught. It's so with the poet Yuri Levitansky. The government didn't indulge him, didn't award him with a prize, but he wasn't offended. But to the question, is it pleasant to be recognized, he answered, is it not pleasant to be recognized? I'm still living and my books are still being published. I can't complain. A minor sensation, big Alla Pugacheva, was awarded, usually disdaining all official functions. This time the star reacted very seriously. Despite all of my characteristic irony, I'm very happy, and I'm very happy to hold this award, and that I'm sitting next to Yuri Yakovlev, with Boris Alexandrovich Pokrovsky, with Sviridov. That is, for me, it's such a celebration of the soul. Incidentally, while she was receiving the diploma, she didn't deprive herself of the pleasure of joking and made the orchestra play her introduction 2 times. The president, completing the festivities, said, "We must, with you, together, bring the great spiritual Russia back to life. The guests were served champagne. In the next office, bookkeeping matters were attended to. With the laureate insignia, a worldly increase was handed out, 65 million rubles. One of today's laureates, Alla Pugacheva, stated that she will give her prize to the aid fund for the victims of the earthquake in Neftegorsk. And now, sad news for lovers of the good old Soviet cinema comedy media. Last night in a San Francisco hospital, the famous comedian actor Savely Kramarov passed away. Iturtas was told this over the phone by a hospital representative. But as actors say, the show must go on no matter what. No, nothing has changed here except for prices, and the chocolate they sell is different, but the main thing is, 16 years ago, Russians have a big heart. Elton John began his press conference in Metropole with these words today. 2 days ago in Stockholm, I spoke with Rostropovich about this. He continued, in Moscow has what I love mankind for, kindness. He'll be here for a little more than a day from concert to concert, but already yesterday will remain in our memories because Elton John was with us. In a suit which seemed to be comical or clown-like to someone, about which he said quite calmly, I simply wanted to wear something in red, from Versace, with Ray Cooper, who could have alone held the auditorium for an hour, and with the music which the Kremlin, I'm not exaggerating, listened, standing up yesterday, and today as well as listening to it as well. He didn't talk about himself at the press conference to journalists in Moscow, and who for the first time in 2 days approached him closer than 100 meters. What he likes and dislikes, he dislikes hypocrisy and cruelty. About bad habits, briefly, he says, I have none today, although from those from his past an entire list could be compiled. And about music, possibly to some it seems monotone, but I will never sing rap, he said, because it's hard to be someone that you're not really. A painting and a pair of eyeglasses he accepted for his collection with gratitude and left, either to the Embassy of Great Britain in honor of the Queen's birthday as a true Englishman and one of the first musicians, rather the second one after the Beatles, who was presented to her personally, or directly to the Kremlin, which was already howling, squealing, and waiting for him, Elton again. Just now, we are the only television agency at this hour to have received video footage from the site of the helicopter hijacking in the airport Ulande in Buryatia. I'll remind you about the facts. 3 masked strangers in the airport today seized a civilian airport helicopter, aviation helicopter. Terrorists demanded free flight passage in the direction which they would indicate, plus 3 billion rubles. Initially, the representatives of the Federal Security Service and the Ministry of Internal Affairs conducted talks. Taken hostage were 3 pilots and 2 technicians who were servicing the helicopter. According to preliminary information, the terrorists gained access directly to the flight field. As was later reported by information agencies, the hostages, 3 pilots and 2 technicians, were released by the terrorists. According to the very latest information which Iturtas received, and which was reported in the Federal Security Service of Russia, the head of the criminal group surrendered to other terrorists, forced the pilot to make the helicopter take off, and then landed in the suburbs of Ulan-Ude, after which they disappeared in an unknown direction. The pilots and helicopter were unharmed, but an operative team is searching for the fugitive terrorists. And this is the note which our broadcast has to end on, but news at this hour would be incomplete without the sports news. I bid you farewell, wish you all the best, and if I wish you surprises, only pleasant ones. Vladimir Topilsky will acquaint you with the sports news. I hand him the sports relay baton. Excuse me, on Channel 1 Sports News, hello. The President of the Russian Federation, Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, through his instructions, has established an additional lifelong monthly material support payment for our prominent athletes, Galina Gorokhina, Larisa Latynina, Tamara Press, Yelena Mukhina, Valentina Stelina, and Igor Novikov. It's pleasant that sports is within the sphere of vital interest of the leadership of the highest rank. Incidentally, the athletes are always ready as well to stretch their hand to their needy. On the initiative of the soccer clubs Dynamo Moscow, Rotor Volgograd, all the revenues from the final Russian Cup championship match between those two teams will go to the victims of the Sakhalin earthquake. Today, 15 matches of the qualifying cycle of the European Soccer Championships, where the Russian team will meet with the San Marino team. This match was planned to be aired on Channel 1. However, the middlemen who bought the rights to broadcast the match asked the directors of public Russian television, asked an exorbitantly high price, and soccer fans will be shown another match about the central match between the teams of Bulgaria and Germany. Contemporary soccer has an attractive feminine face. In Sweden, the Women's Soccer World Championships are underway. The sport number one, executed by the representatives of the fairer gender, is no less spectacular than the men's game. Everything was visibly proven in the match between the United States and China. The current world champions sustained their first loss, a tie 3-3. In Paris, the Open French Tennis Championships continue the second tournament of the season from the Grand Slam series. Today, two more semi-finalists became known in the men's singles division for 2 years in a row on the Roland Garros courts. Sergio Bruguera won. Evidently, the Spaniard would like a third victory. Today, his rival in the semi-final was Renzo Forlani from Italy. From the first set, Bruguera managed to force his own game on his rival, and the Italian had no other recourse but to surrender to the mercy of the victor. In 2 hours, the Spanish player held his 19th straight victory, 6-2, 7-5, 6-2. And the American Michael Chang against the little-known Romanian Adriano Voine. The Romanian managed to gain himself a reputation here for beating high-profile players, leaving outside the winner's circle sportsbacker Andrei Chesnokov. But Chang didn't give his fans a second to doubt his own superiority. In dash pace, in 1 hour 42 minutes, the Romanian player was broken 7-5, 6-0, 6-1. As they say, no comment necessary. And so in the semi-finals, Evgeny Kafelnikov will meet Thomas Muster and also Sergio Bruguera and Michael Chang. In the women's pairs division, not in the quarterfinals, are Yelena Makarova and Yevgenia Manyukova, who lost to the international duo Novotna Sanchez. And now, about such a type of sport as rugby, unfortunately, it's not a frequent guest on our television screens. The first round of the Russian Rugby Championships has ended. The table is headed by the Krasnoyar team. In the last match, the Krasnoyarians demolished the Gagarin pilots from suburban Moscow Molin 41-21. In autumn, our team will participate in the finals of the European Championships, but for now, the Russian rugby players may calmly view the World Championships in South Africa. There, on the next weekend, the semi-finalists of the playoffs will be known. In the finals of the Western Conference of the NHL, Detroit-Chicago, the Red Wings need to take one more leap only to fly to the finals of the Stanley Cup. In the third match, Detroit defeated its opponents 4-3. The fate of the match was decided in the second additional time. The Chicago goalie Belfour deflected 47 shots, could not manage with a fairly easy goal of Vladimir Konstantinov, and Detroit leads in the series 3-0. The ex-world champion in the International Boxing Federation super weight category, Evander Holyfield, needs immediate medical examination, even despite the fact that Holyfield 2 weeks ago defeated Ray Mercer. Consequences of his cardiac weakness give physicians serious concern. That was the sports news on Channel 1. Gaining popularity quite quickly in Russia is baseball. Those who've decided to dedicate themselves to that game are video fragment. In a word, be vigilant. Goodbye. Good evening, and I'll tell you about the weather for the 8th of June. On the Kola Peninsula and in the pre-Baltic area, under the influence of cyclones and atmospheric fronts, it will be cloudy and rainy, day temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees. The majority of European Russia in the zone of a powerful anticyclone with a center over the central Volga. Here it's dry and sunny, but the temperature of the air differs in places. In the west of Russia and non-Chernozem area at night, +2 to 7. During the day, it will be up to +20, 25 5 degrees. In the Haranges district, 15 to 20 degrees. It's a lot cooler in the Republic of Komi, where with the northern airs, Arctic air is coming over from the Karsk Sea. Therefore, here during the day it will be no higher than plus 8 to 10 degrees. In the northeast, around 5 degrees. In the Kirov district and Perm, in Tatarstan and Bashkiria, it's clear and cool at night around 0. In some places, freezing is possible during the day from 8 to 15 degrees. In the central parts of Russia, on the central and lower Volga, the cooling effect was not long-lasted. Tomorrow in the Sarata, Volgograd and Astrakhan districts, it will be mostly clear without precipitation, plus 20 to 25. In the central Chernozem area, up to 27 above 0. In Kuban and the Stavropol area, in the zone of an atmospheric front, torrential rains will pass through with thunderstorms here, plus 20 to 25 degrees. On the Black Sea resorts, where the air will reach temperatures of plus 20 to 25, in the seawater, 18 to 20 degrees. Brief thunderstorms will pass through. Beyond the Caucasus, plus 23 to 28 degrees. In the second half of the day, torrential rains are possible. In the west of Ukraine, in Moldova, and in Belarus, plus 22 to 27, with rains and thunderstorms. And the weather in St. Petersburg and Moscow. In Petersburg, on Thursday, mostly clear skies without precipitation, night temperatures of plus 13 to 15 during the day, 20 to 22. In Moscow and suburbs, mostly clear skies without precipitation at night, plus 9 to 11 during the day, 23 to 25. That was the weather forecast. I wish you to be in a good disposition. Goodbye.